Hey y'all, Jason here. Books. There's a lot of them out there. There's also a lot of them that I read. And if you like books, then today's your lucky day, because I'm going to be chronicling my history as a reader by going over many books that I read over the course of my life. Going all the way back to the beginning. The first book I have any memories of is Mr. Cookie Baker by Monica Wellington. It was my favorite book when I was younger. I used to have my parents read it to me all the time. So much so that when I was getting rid of my old books, my mom refused to let me throw this out. It was a very simple book, only telling the story of Mr. Baker baking cookies to sell in his store. But I still love this book so much. Now that I think about it, I think I really only like this book because the cookies look really delicious. Some other books that I remember from my early childhood were Sesame Street's books. Specifically, the monster at the end of this book, starring lovable furry old Grover by John Stone and Grover's Own Alphabet by Salvatore Murdocha. These were just silly books that taught me the alphabet and were a fun story for me to listen to. I also remember having family reading nights where my family would get together and my dad would read to all of us. I recall him reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl to us, and I greatly enjoyed it. These early books helped to develop my love for reading and prepare me for harder books in the future. Now let's move forward to when I actually knew how to read. My favorite book series was My Weird School by Dan Gutman, and the subsequent sequel series My Weird School Days and My Weirder School. These are straightforward books that just tell the tale of AJ, a student who hates school, and his adventures regarding all the wacky teachers at his school. Each book focuses on a different teacher and their eccentric behavior. I love this series so much that I even had plans to write my own book for the series. But I was in 3rd grade, so it never really amounted to much. Besides this series, I loved reading mysteries such as the Cam Jansen series by David A. Adler and A to Z Mysteries by Ron Roy. They were always a fun read, though I don't think I ever figured out the case before the characters did. I also have many fond memories of reading Magic Treehouse by Mary Pope Osborne, which features kids Jack and Annie using their magic treehouse to travel through time and learn about history. It was always great to learn and read at the same time. Every time I had to bring in a book for Rockland Reading, I would always bring in my favorite book, On the Field with Derek Jeter by Matt Christopher. This was a biography of one of my favorite baseball players, Derek Jeter. I remember reading this book all the time, and I still recall my favorite part, which was when Derek Jeter went to McDonald's after his first Major League Baseball game. I always found that part hilarious. After looking back at these books, it's clear that after I learned to read, I started to read to learn. So far, I've only talked about books that were normal for kids my age to read. Now let's talk about the weird nerdy stuff I'd read. I loved to read about video games, specifically reading strategy guides. These guides were put together, usually by Prima Games, with insight from the developers to write a complete guide to the game, revealing all the little secrets and hidden details. Usually players would read through just one section of the game that they were having trouble in, and that's it. But I just read through the whole thing for fun. I had so many strategy guides, from Mario Party 8, to Mario Kart Double Dash, to Super Mario Galaxy 2. I actually read these so much that they became absolutely destroyed. I read through the Mario Party 8 one so much that my mom had to buy me a second one, since the first one was almost unreadable. I also sometimes read the instruction manuals that came with games, which gave basic information regarding the game and sometimes a few tips and tricks. I specifically remember reading the guide to Super Smash Bros. Melee multiple times because I found it so interesting. I love learning a bunch of information about topics that I love, which is why Marvel's Avengers: The Ultimate Character Guide by Alan Calsil and the official Pokemon Handbook by Maria S. Barbo were some of my most read books. These books just went over the characters in either Marvel or Pokemon universes and gave their bios, strengths, and weaknesses. I would read and reread these books constantly, always looking for new details to learn. Reading through these kinds of books helped to immerse myself in these worlds that I loved, and trained me to be analytical and remember lots of small details about a large number of characters. Speaking of random books that are not meant to be just read through from start to finish, I adored reading through record books like the Guinness Book of World Records. I even started to collect them. Though for Guinness, I always opted to pick up the gamer edition instead of the regular one, as my love for video games pushes me to learn as much as I can about them. Even though I knew most of the facts in them, it was always a blast reading and soaking up so much information about games and maybe learning some small fun facts that I didn't pick up on before. Every year, at the Scholastic Book Fair, I would always pick out the Scholastic Book of World Records written by Jennifer Core Morse and bring it home. I have all the way from the 2010 edition to the 2014 edition. I adored looking at all the graphs that show the runners up for all the records, and there was a fun section in the back that gave a record for each state. Did you know that in 2010, New York held the U.S. record for the state with the largest underwater tunnel, that being the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel? Getting back to some actual novels, A Series of Unfortunate Events by Daniel Handler, How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell, and Time Riders by Alex Scarro were some of the series I read as I matured as both as a reader and as a person. These books have much more mature themes than other books I have read and contain more complicated and intricate plots. They introduced me to complex characters and situations that I wouldn't have been able to understand at a younger age. In the middle of high school, I started to get into reading comic books. I started by reading the comics that my dad had left over from his youth, such as The Infinity War by Jim Starlin and The Flash by Jeff Johns. Reading comics is a lot of fun since I already know so many little details about these characters. Seeing them in a story and their powers in action is always such a treat. Eventually, I bought a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, which gave me unlimited access to almost all Marvel comics, allowing me to read so many stories from the past, as well as read current stories that people are talking about. Some of my favorites were Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Gwen, and Days of Future Past. They all have drastically different styles and tones, and have the ability to tell so many different stories. Along with the mainstream Marvel and DC comics, my inner video game nerd still wants to come out. So I read some manga based on the Legend of Zelda series written by Akira Himikawa. These chronicle the stories of the games while also providing extra characterization and details about the story and characters. Now, back in the present, I am currently reading Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, which is a Star Wars novel which takes place after Episode 6 of the series. All the books that I've read over my lifetime has affected the reader and person I am today. From children's books to dark comics, these books have shaped my personality and I couldn't be more grateful for them. I hope to read so many more books in the future and have them shape me into an even better person.